Who is your God? Does everyone have a God? Does everyone believe in a God? And if so, in which one? Find out more in today's episode of the podcast According to Sci-Faith. I'm Joshua Göcking and you're listening to According to Sci-Faith. Who is your God? That's what's the title of this episode, and it's a kind of a provocative title. Depending on who you are, depending on what you believe, you might say, my God is the Christian God. You might say, maybe my God is the Muslim God, or whatever. Or maybe you might say, I'm an atheist. I do not have a God, or I do not believe in a God. So the question is, does everyone has his God and atheists don't have one, or how is this working, and what does this mean? And I think there are some interesting answers one can find, and there is one thing that I picked up recently, or that I learned recently of somebody who how he was defining what a God means, or what to him, or how he interpreted what a God is, or how one could interpret a God or faith in general, or religion, or how you want to call it. So this is also depending on, so when you, for example, when you have, as a Christian, maybe you notice when you have doubts in your life, when you doubt, is God the real, is God real, is he really there? There are new scientific things that, or new things in science that seem to put in doubt the faith, or something like that. And actually that was something that triggered it with me. So some historical occurrences where somebody said he is not convinced that they happened, but they would be in agreement with the Bible. So when you experience this, what does this actually mean? And what I came to see is, what it means is that you have elevated something above God. So, for example, in this case, you have these scientific findings, or not even scientific findings, but just historical findings, which seem to contradict the what the Bible says, or what the history of how the Bible tells this history. So they are in conflict, and depending on what you believe, or what you value higher, you will either go with your doubt, or you go with what you believe. And this is exactly what I came to see, is that there are kind of hierarchies. There are hierarchies of what you value, what you believe, what you value the most, what you value the least, what has the highest stand in your life, and what has the least stand. And do you have a hierarchy of this? And basically what's at the top of this hierarchy is you could say is what you believe God to be. And this thought is actually not of me, or it's nothing that I stumbled myself on, but already the psychoanalyst Jung had this, and he said basically the same thing, that there are that every man has something which is the most important to him, or which is the most essential thing he believes, or he is convinced of, and this is in his hierarchy at the top. And to every man, this what he has as his top is his God. So to him there was no question of whether a God exists, but rather the question, what is your God? So hence also the title of this episode. So I do not believe everything that he says, or I'm not really familiar with the rest of his analysis, only to some degree. But I think in this part he is to some degree at least right. And it's interesting that the Bible also tells of this. So in the Bible there's not only mention of the Christian God, but there's also mention of many other so-called lowercase God, or as the Bible calls them, idols. So idols were basically all the gods that the other peoples in at the times of Israel were worshipping. For example, Baal, or in Egypt Ra, or different other gods. We know from the Roman and the Greek mythology that they also had many different gods, and the Bible would call those idols, and would call the worship of those idols, it would obviously call sinful, since many Israelites also were tempted to worship those idols. And actually the Judaism and later Christianity was one of the few religions who really had this exclusivity, that it said, yeah, you can only worship one God. Because if you look in ancient Rome and ancient Greek, they were, you could say, pretty open about God. So when the Greeks and the Romans, they got together, since Rome conquered Greece, then they basically accepted the Greek worshipping their god. They even started also worshipping Greek gods, and they mixed them up all together. So for them it was not really a problem if there were a bajillion gods who could worship. For them it was just like, yeah, you worship your god, I worship mine gods, this god is important to me and this is important to you. And there were also differences among themselves whose god they worshiped. Some were worshipping maybe Bacchus, the god of wine. If you were a warrior, you would worship Mars because he was the god of war, and so on. So you had also there your priorities. You can see it already there in these polytheistic religions. You can see they had their hierarchies depending on what they would do. If they were a warrior, then the highest god for them, of course, was Mars. If they were in medicine, then the god, this, depending on which name just escapes me, was their highest god. And so they had already these hierarchies established in their polytheistic worldview, and depending on who you were, you would prioritize different gods in your life. But the Bible is pretty clear that it says there's only one God, and that they only exalt him above everything else. And so what they say is or what you can conclude from this is that there are those idols, and there is one true God according to the Bible. And what you have in your highest priority is basically your God, whatever it is. If it is the Christian God, if it is in ancient times Baal, Jupiter, or whoever, or in today's time, I mean, we don't have people who are worshipping idols, or at least not that many. It's not that common anymore to worship some idols, but also still there are maybe people who believe in talismans and those things. But it has shifted a little bit what we might, if somebody does not believe in God or in a God, what he might prioritize the most. But there are still things that he has on his hierarchy. There are still things he has at the top. For example, it might be that science is your top hierarchy, that this is at the top, that you say whatever can be proven by science, that's the only thing for me, that's the thing that I will believe, that's the thing that I can count on. Then this would be on this top of your priority. And according to Jung and to this thought, it would be basically your God. And there are also other things. Maybe you are... Maybe you say family is above everything. It's just about love. It's just about this and that. So this can also become a thing that is at the top of your belief system and be your God in this sense. And also, what's pretty common today are thought structures or beliefs. Ideologies, you call it, that can be at the top of your thinking, of your hierarchy, which everything other needs to submit to. So everything that happens, you always watch it through the lens of a certain ideology, whether it is a political ideology or a different version or a different form of ideology. And what's interesting there is that if you look just at the term ideology and compare it with the biblical term idols, you see it's the same source. So even the word has a similar source. So even though it looks like a lot has changed in going from pagan societies who are worshipping idols made out of wood or stone or bronze or whatever, to today where we basically, or some people basically worship some ideas or ideologies. So it looks like there is a lot different, but if you look at the word itself, you see maybe not so much has changed. So what do we do with this, or how can we proceed? So this was basically the first statement that I made, that I said, okay, basically everyone has a God, and what your God is just what is at the top of your priorities, what you deem to be the most important to you, the thing through which you watch everything in your life, through which you watch all your life, which is the essential part of your being, and this is then your God. This was the first statement. So now I'm gonna make a second statement, which I think is also pretty reasonable, and this is that basically everything in this world, everything secular, is corruptible. So you can see it everywhere. You can see it especially nowadays where so many things are happening, and where basically everything, even if it was meant to be good, even if it had a good purpose, even if the people who created it were had well-intentioned, at some point it usually gets corrupted. At some point people come in who abuse what is there, and it gets corrupted and sometimes eventually even destroyed. So you can see this in every discipline, be it an ideology, be it something else. For example, I mean, this podcast is called Sci-Faith, and you can see it. Science itself can be corrupted, and it has been several times in history. So the example I use the most, for example, is during the Third Reich in National Socialism, where they basically started to do something which they called German physics, where they basically said that most of the physics that was current then, or theory of relativity and quantum mechanics, was constructed by Jews and therefore inferior and nonsense. And then they created their own physics, which they called German physics. And there were even Nobel laureates who were working on these theories and who are working on this. So there you can see obviously how science was corrupted by an ideology. And this has happened there. It has happened since sometimes. In some degrees it's also happening today. So this attack on science, if you would like to call it, is always there. And therefore science itself is corruptible. So if science is at the top, if it's if this is the highest hierarchy, then you can and will be deceived. So this is one thing. It's also in different cases, and even one's faith can be corrupted if the thing that's at the top is replaced by is not placed, if there's not God there, but other things like in faith we call it religion. We say. We basically make the difference between faith being a relationship with Christ and living according to what the Bible says, and just living to some according to some traditions, or to in a legalistic way following laws without really having this connection to God. This is what we call religion, and even this can corrupt your faith. So even there, corruption can come in. And what's really interesting is also that there are sometimes people who know of this corruptible behavior, or who know that for example in science, who know that science is corruptible, who know that there are things where you can be certain that you know something and it's not that good established in science. For example, you believe something to be completely true, but the scientific evidence for it is flawed, and you, by the kind of how these studies are done, you kind of know that the evidence might be flawed, but still you have this blind spot and you blindly believe still these evidences, or that might be fake. So this is the interesting part, that even if some people know of the thing that they believe in to be able to be corruptible, they oftentimes are still blind to it. That's a really fascinating thing, I think, oftentimes what you can oftentimes see. But what we can conclude is that everything is basically corruptible. So if you have your your highest hierarchy of secular things is, what is at your top, it is all, if it's something secular, it's all corruptible. It's all, and then you are necessarily deceived. There is no other way to see it. So if there is something secular, if there is something in this world which has the highest place for you, which you put the most value in, then you are, according to this logic, if you believe those two statements to be true, then you are, by definition, deceived, because those are all corruptible. So what do we do with this? Is everything lost? So is there nothing which is incorruptible, nothing that we can trust? And the answer is, if we take those two statements and say there's nothing more than this world, there's nothing more than this secular world, then the answer would be no. There would be nothing we can trust, and we would be deceived by definition. There would be no way out, and we would just be deceived. We could not help it. So what does this that sounds rather sad, but what is the good message of this? And the good message is, I believe, is that this already shows that there needs to be a higher quantity. There needs to be something higher than this world. There needs to be something higher which is not corruptible, which is not subject to this corruptible world, and therefore is not corruptible. And this is what we call God. This is what the Bible calls God, and what it talks about when it talks of God. And it's really like this, that if we go with these two statements, we can basically conclude, if there is no God, then there is then we cannot help but be deceived. There is no hope. If there's no God, we cannot help but we are deceived no matter what. But if there is a God, then we have hope. Then we can hope that there is a God who is trustworthy, who is incorruptible, who is always truthful, and in whom we can trust, in whom we can put all our trust, and therefore never be corrupted as long as we put our trust in Him. And basically, at least as I believe, you can see from the fact that we can understand that everything in this world is corrupted, that everything in this world to some degree is corrupted and will lead us to being deceived in some way, that we can know this, that we can distinguish this, and not just blindly go our ways without being aware of that. That already shows us that there must be something higher, that there must be something incorruptible, because how can you know something to be corrupt if corruption is all you know? So by us knowing that there has to be something that everything is corruptible, and there has to we basically know that there has to be something that is incorruptible, and this is God. And so I think by this we can already know that there is a God and there has to be a God. And what's also what the Bible also tells us is that he can be experienced, and that he wants to have communion with us, that he wants to unite with us, so we can get to know him. And I think this is what would basically be the next step. So if you take these statements and you say, yes, those make sense to me, and I think there must be something higher, then I encourage you to just pray a prayer and ask God to reveal himself to you, that you might see him and that he might show himself to you. And one thing being said, I mean, I talked a lot about corruption, a corruptible world. Basically, that's just a different word for what the Bible calls sin. So basically, it shows that in the sinful world, we are all the time deceived without knowing it, if we don't have something from which we know that we can trust it blindly, that we can trust it completely. And this something is not a something but a someone, and this someone is God, and he wants to get to know you. So I really encourage you, if this what I just said makes sense to you, then I encourage you to just reach out, pray this prayer that he reveals himself to you, read the Bible, read the scriptures, start at the Gospels, because that's the good message, and then continue from there. And I hope and pray that God will reveal himself to you. So this was today's episode of Sci-Faith. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it made sense. I hope you could understand it. It was just something that I was pondering the last weeks, and which God revealed to me, and which I thought was pretty helpful and encouraged me in my faith. So if you had a similar, if you felt similar, then just let me know. I always like to hear from you. You can reach me at my webpage, psy-faith.de/en, and there you can go to the contact form and just write me. And also, if you want to learn more about Sci-Faith, you can get more information there, get information about my book, which right now only exists in German, but if you're able to speak German, then you can just order it. And also, if you are really fluent in German, you can also listen to the German version of the podcast, where there are a lot more episodes, also on scientific topics, where I really dive deep into especially physics topics. So I hope to see you there. And until then, I wish you all a great time.